cloud migration. So before we dive into this, I just want to make a couple of introductions. My name is Mario. I work as a customer success manager for ServiceRocket. And if you are new to ServiceRocket, here's a short statement that defines who we are. If you have any questions after this presentation, please feel free to shoot us an email at this email address right here, services@servicerocket.com. And today's speaker is someone very special. I'm talking about Foogie or Foogie. He's our business operations manager, and he put together this very nice presentation about, once again, how to ensure a successful cloud migration. But this presentation goes way beyond just slides. It's more than 10 years of experience that Foogie has. And I'm sure that he's gonna present something that is gonna be very, very interesting. So with that said, Foogie, I'm gonna let you take the lead from here.
All right, thanks Mario for the intro and welcome everyone to the webinar. My name is Foogie and I'll be your guide today to hopefully help you navigate through this complex maze that is cloud migration, because it is pretty complex. And hopefully I can also show you how we can make the journey a lot smoother and easier, because it can get a bit rough on the edges at certain times. Some of the items we will discuss today as we look at the agenda is, for example, the first one would be the factors that can fail a cloud migration. And you will see later that there are many factors that can fail a cloud migration. The importance of having a project plan, because planning is key. The kind of assessments and discovery you need to perform before you actually do the staging and also the production migration. An example of a sound communication plan, because communication is key. You have to communicate. The key elements of a runbook, and we will then finally end with a Q&A session. So throughout today's session, I will speak from our experience with countless cloud migrations with a lot of our customers and point out key learnings from each of these agenda items. Remember to key in your questions should you have any to our chat. It will be pretty much like how we do it in Twitch. I promise I'm not a Twitch gamer, but although the setup does look like that. So remember to key in your questions, and Mario will moderate the questions before I would then hopefully get to them during the Q&A. So next slide, please. So this is a quote that I put into one of my blog posts after a particularly painful cloud migration episode when I was working as a consultant. And I immediately said that cloud migrations can be as unpredictable as the weather in London. I live in London, and if you've ever been to London before, you know that the weather here is really unpredictable. You can look at the weather prediction app and it would say that it's going to be sunny for the next 6 hours. Do not trust that app, because it could be really sunny when you're looking from behind your window, but as soon as you get dressed, go out, it's going to start raining. So yeah, anything and everything can make the difference between a migration that goes way below its predicted effort or way above its estimates, requiring multiple change orders. And change orders are a word that we try to avoid in all of our projects. It is as unpredictable as the weather in London. You can have the most elaborate discovery and staging process, even performing multiple staging migrations, which we usually do for a lot of our customers, only to be met with a surprise on migration day. Trust me when I say that a majority of us have been heavily involved with cloud migrations have had nightmares about it. And I mean this literally. While there isn't a magic solution to this, we will look at various ways you can minimize these surprises and mitigate them should it occur. So we will discuss all of those as we proceed through today's session. So next slide, please. All right, so I promised just now that we're going to go through some of the factors that can fail a cloud migration. Bear with me because this part can be lengthy, but I have a lot of stories to tell on each of the items. So here are some common factors. The most common one, I'm sure some of you that have already run a cloud migration before can identify with the first one immediately. Invalid or duplicate emails with some of your users in the server instance. So this can be really painful to fix as it generally involves like a lot of SQL and REST API magic and a very deep knowledge about how the tables relate to each other in Confluence or Jira. So this will be, for example, how the CWD user table works with the user mapping table in Confluence, for example. Just to add salt to injury, Atlassian has some of the strictest rule when it comes to what is considered an acceptable format for users' email. So an example here, you can see foo plus alias at company.com. This is what we see with a lot of our customers. And the reason behind these kind of email addresses is because some of our customers actually create system users to run REST API scripts. And in order to not create an email account for each of those system users, they would then create what we consider an alias user within G Suite, let's say. So you would have, let's say, for example, Foogie at ServiceRocket.com, and then an alias would be Foogie plus ServiceRocket at ServiceRocket.com or Foogie plus Jira migration user at ServiceRocket.com. This is actually not allowed by cloud, and it will be rejected if you try to migrate it this way. The other one that is very common is, of course, multiple users sharing the same email address. This is considered a duplicate user. You need to also fix this before you actually migrate to cloud. So another common factor are apps that no longer work as they should post-migration. Some common examples include the behaviors module in Script Runner. It doesn't work at all in cloud because cloud doesn't support some of the things that are required by behaviors. So this includes, like, for example, JavaScript customization that behaviors can do. So, and generally my advice is try to minimize any kind of Script Runner scripts you may have in your system, because I know some of you may use that right now, but keep in mind that it's gonna make your migration journey a lot more complicated. And also Script Runner is what I consider essentially hacking Jira, doing what Jira is not supposed to do. Try to change, if you can, try to switch your mindset from, essentially building everything with Script Runner. Every single requirement that cannot be met with Jira, you just then code it into Script Runner. Think about maybe how you can recreate it or essentially meeting that requirement by using standard Jira functionality or maybe using Jira automation. So another thing is, a lot of our customers assume that all these issues with cloud migration and apps is only limited to just third-party apps. That is actually not true, because an example here is Team Calendars, which is an Atlassian app. Keep in mind that this app cannot be migrated to cloud. The cloud migration actually does not copy any of the calendars over to cloud. This can come as a surprise to quite a lot of users. So there are some good news though, in terms of the Team Calendars front. Atlassian has provided us with a beta script to migrate calendars automatically, but you still need a lot of manual process. And this is something that you can obtain, like that beta script, you can obtain it through a move ticket, which we're going to discuss later. Otherwise, if you don't have this script, or if the script doesn't work for your scenario, you have to migrate each calendar manually one by one. And this actually happened to one of our migration work, where one of our customers had a few hundred calendars, and we actually had to make sure that we migrate all of the calendars within the migration window, which is quite short. So it took 3 ServiceRocket consultants working around the clock over a weekend to migrate each calendar. And one of them actually worked 20 hours straight, which is traumatizing. The other thing that can fail a cloud migration, size of attachments. This one is a requirement from Atlassian is that you need to split your attachments into 5 GB chunks for the media upload. So imagine if you have 100 plus gigabytes of media, this can be really time consuming. That's not also accounting for the fact that you need to individually download this from your server into your workstation and then re-upload that from your workstation into cloud, and which is of course at the mercy of your unreliable home Wi-Fi. Production migrations typically only has a short weekend window, like I mentioned earlier, so this can be a potential risk to failing the production migration. So pro tip on this is if you are on a PostgreSQL database, PSQL, there is some good news. Atlassian does have a cloud uploader tool. You can request from them using a move ticket. What this app does is it will automatically synchronize all of the attachments from your on-premise instance directly to cloud with a click of a button. So you don't actually have to split it into 5 GB chunks, and you don't need to download the attachments to your workstation. So you're not relying on your home Wi-Fi. Yeah. Happy days, because a lot of us are working from home right now.
Foogie, so we got a question here. Is there a limit to the number of attachments? We use smart attachments.
Limit to the number of attachments. Is that the number is not the problem. The size is the problem when it comes to cloud. I think cloud maximum supported attachments, I could be wrong. I cannot remember the right number. It could be less than 100 gigs. But Atlassian does not impose this. It doesn't. It's just a mention limitation. But we've seen customers that have managed to upload like 200 gigs of attachments, and so far they haven't faced any issues from Atlassian side.
Thanks. All right. Thanks.
All right. I hope that answers the question, but if you have a follow-up question for that, that's great.
There's a follow-up here. 100 gigabytes per issue or for the project?
For the entire cloud instance.
Okay.
That's the Atlassian. It's quite surprising, which is why a lot of users cannot meet that limitation, which is why Atlassian doesn't enforce this rule. Atlassian doesn't actually say that you cannot use cloud if you have or they would charge you extra money. They don't do that, actually.
Gotcha. We're ready. Thanks. We are getting other questions, but it might be better if we save them to the end of the presentation. Yep. We're ready.
All right, cool. We must not also forget to check for integrity issues during staging, as a common failure during UAT missing custom fields in workflow transitions that can then prevent users from transitioning issues in cloud. Lastly, keep in mind that JCMA and CCMA, which is the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant and the Confluence Cloud Migration Assistant, I want to mention here something as well, that the CCMA is now a required process to move Confluence to cloud. You no longer can use a full site export and import method that we used to do in the past. So everything now relies on Confluence Cloud Migration Assistant. And we believe in the future, the same thing will apply for JCMA, which is the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant. But right now, of course, we all know that JCMA has a lot of limitations right now, particularly like the fact that it doesn't support Jira Service Management. But then once it supports it, which I would tell you it's going to be really soon, you will potentially see that JCMA is a required tool to migrate to cloud. Now, these tools have a problem, which is the fact that they have mandatory updates before you can migrate to cloud. This means that you will need to be in the latest version of these apps, right? Otherwise, the migration will not proceed. Now, what this means is that your successful staging migration may be using one version of the app, but during production migration, you may be forced to upgrade to the latest JCMA or CCMA, which will bring its own set of functionalities that can differ. And this has been known to fail migrations often. And speaking of which, this actually just happened with CCMA with one of our customers last month. Thankfully, this was during the staging run. The latest CCMA version actually caused a huge bug that prevented us from completing the migration. Yeah, but thankfully, this is something that is rather new as well. Atlassian introduced a Dart feature that allows you to migrate using CCMA using an older version of CCMA. But this is on a case-to-case basis, and it doesn't work all the time. And preferably, you shouldn't rely on this. Just keep in mind that you may have to migrate using the latest version of the app at all times. All right, next slide. Finally, that's a mouthful. There's a lot of things to discuss just now. Now, functionality differences. So as a history lesson of cloud in the past, Jira and Confluence Cloud was called Jira and Confluence On Demand, if you remember, if you guys are from that era. And used to be the Jira and Confluence source code, whether it's on demand, which is cloud, or server or DC, are in the same code base. So Atlassian developers work on it in the same code base. And then their on-demand offering, which is their cloud offering, is essentially just them setting up VMs of the server instances. But ever since they started moving to the AWS microservice kind of model, they actually had a fork in the code base. And now they have a separate cloud team that is working on the cloud code base, and also a server or DC team that is working on the server or DC code base. So these are essentially very different products. So what that means is you will see a huge difference in functionality between server or cloud. This is to be expected. So a common pitfall is expecting cloud to behave exactly the same way as server or DC. It's important to highlight the differences, but not to dwell in it. Certain functionality will ultimately be missing. Accepting these and moving forward with a cloud transformation plan will propel your organization forward. I've personally seen so many customers spend a lot of money just to mirror the functionality between server and cloud. They ended up delaying the cloud migration. And then remember just now that I mentioned that CCMA and JCMA has constant updates. So that exposes us to more risks of a failed migration due to those updates. And also the fact that cloud as a product, Atlassian actually updates and upgrades it sometimes twice a week due to their rapid deployment model. So all of these changes, if you think about it, just a week delay can bring you additional risks that can bring a lot more surprises during production. So it's important to let go, accept the differences, and you will have a much better migration experience. Next, we will discuss, like, all of these are really bad news, right? But don't worry about it. Next, we will discuss some key concepts to mitigate and prevent surprises. So let's go to the next slide. All right, plan early. Don't plan like this Department of Planning, of course. I cannot emphasize enough how important planning is to cloud migration. A really common strategy I see in the Atlassian community when I see other people doing cloud migration is people often tend to do trial and error, just keep migrating, just keep hitting the nail multiple times, and it will eventually enter, some might say. But as you can see from the factors that I mentioned earlier, and also all the issues you may face, these will definitely not work. Not having a plan will result in a migration that will appear successful at first glance, but on closer inspection is riddled with integrity issues, missing elements, and broken core functionality. This is something that we see with customers that do not do a proper UAT, because every time you do a CCMA or JCMA migration, they will put like a summary of the migration, right? A common mistake is they just look at that summary and say, oh, all my issues are migrated, all my workflows, all my pages are migrated. This is a successful migration. And then they just end it there. Actually, I would guarantee you, even if it's complete one-to-one copy of all the issues, workflows, etc., you would still at least find 10 different things that are broken post-migration. This is guaranteed. Right, so next, let's go to the project plan. without a plan, you're not going to meet your migration timeline. Having a project plan with a good schedule like this one over here will keep all your stakeholders accountable for their deliverables. Because keep in mind that a cloud migration usually has multiple streams of work. It's not going to be just, let's say, for example, one person doing all of it, one person doing discovery, staging, UAT, and production, because you might have the DBAs involved as well. You might have the web server team involved as well, or the IT involved. You may also require help from the LDAP administrator during SSO and deployment. In ServiceRocket, we have a very good project approach that ensures all blockers, risks, and updates are surfaced weekly at the very minimum, ensuring transparency and accountability. And having this kind of plan also helps you see whether you are falling behind schedule, whether there's any bottleneck. This is just part of our big project status report that we usually do for our customers. And in that report, maybe you would see some of it later, that there will be risk, blockers, key updates, and then we can identify any bottlenecks every week before it becomes an issue. All right, let's go to the next one. So some important planning elements here that you can see, this is actually all within our project status update page as well that we do with our customers. So some of it, the most important part is the move ticket. I cannot emphasize enough that the move ticket needs to be raised when you even start to think about migrating to cloud. You shouldn't raise it only when you're about to do staging, let's say. You shouldn't raise it when you are already invested in it. You've already, already started exploring JCMA or CCMA. Raise it early, even when you even have that that awareness of potentially moving to cloud. So a move ticket raise with Atlassian, so that Atlassian is aware of your plans, is important and are able to provide timely support should you need it. The experience with Atlassian may vary, as some regions would even have a cloud migration manager. This is especially true in the EMEA region. And this cloud migration manager will schedule weekly update calls with you to make sure everything is running smoothly. The move ticket is also handy to have a few people from Atlassian assigned specifically to your migration to make sure that everyone is always available on your migration weekend. And if you do run into tenant jobs error or the dead state errors, which we probably won't have time to cover that today. If you do run into those, they can quickly restore the service and get the migration restarted again. So, and also move ticket is useful for some of the items I mentioned earlier, which is like, obtaining some of the scripts or workarounds for some of the limitations with the migration. So secondly, you need to also have the migration team finalized and the roles identified. This includes, for example, the stakeholders, who are typically people that have a vested interest in the migration, or the PM, which is the product manager. If you're working with a partner like ourselves, you would have a partner within, let's say, ServiceRocket. You will have a PM within ServiceRocket, and you will have PM within your own migration team. So there will be two PMs working side by side. This ensures that everyone is aware what they need to do. You will also need to know who are the tech leads, who are the DBAs, who's the migration engineer that's actually doing the migration, and all the SMEs. The SMEs are important here. These are subject matter experts. They are typically the power users that would potentially know how each space is supposed to function, how, what kind of user macros they have on certain pages, what kind of workflow transitions or post functions is triggered in their projects. These are users that are very important during UAT, for example. You need to make sure that they manage to test the staging, migrated cloud instance, and give you their feedback before you proceed with production. Key milestones need to be documented as well, along with their timelines. Time budgets may be associated with these milestones. to document what is budgeted, utilized, and remaining, so that you can spot bottlenecks. For example, you're spending too much time on discovery, let's say. Why is that? Or it's too much time on assessments or workarounds. Project risks that I mentioned earlier need to be highlighted every week along with their severity and likelihood. And there should be an owner assigned to each risk. Now, the risk needs to be transparent as early as possible. Even if the risk you feel is not likely, is definitely not likely, you should document it using your project status updates. Key decisions such as what spaces or projects and which users or groups are migrated needs to be documented. This helps to keep the team aligned on the direction of the migration, especially if there are multiple streams of work. ServiceRocket has worked on plenty of such projects that include, for example, Jira Confluence upgrade before migration, SSO enablement post-migration using Atlas in Access or G Suite, and change management process discovery and implementation. Without documenting the key decisions here, a consultant working on the Jira stream of work, an engineer on the Confluence stream of work, and a user management expert on the SSO enablement may have conflicts with each other, causing the project to fail. Imagine if, for example, Confluence was first migrated using CCMA, SSO is then enabled using Atlassian Access, and Jira finally is migrated using full site export and import. Some of you will know what will happen after this. Essentially, Confluence users will suddenly lose access if they are not part of Jira, if this is done in that order. So having that key decision on what goes after what particular task is very important. Blockers and their owners need to be identified with a due date to clear each of them. This ensures accountability and helps to determine impact to the project schedule. Usually from our experience with our customers, the most common blockers are access or onboarding for the entire migration team. Usually just to get people access to everything that's needed, like the database, to Jira, to the Jira SSH to the Jira instance or the Confluence instance, usually takes the longest. So plan ahead, make sure everybody gets their access before you proceed. Yeah, and finally, you need to have the cadence of meetings set up, otherwise the meetings will not happen in the first place. Of course, if this all sound a bit too much, right? Too many things to figure out, too many things that can potentially fail. If you need a partner to help you through this process, you can always rely on ServiceRocket as well. All right, next, the assessment. I mentioned the assessment just now, and I think this is very important to ensure that all stakeholders are aware of what may change post-migration. Remember just now I said functionalities will differ, right? So having this kind of assessment and essentially coming up with a summary of what may change will keep the stakeholders informed and also keep surprises at bay. And then you can make a decision as a team, what needs to be kept, what needs to work around, and what can be abandoned. So, abandon as many things as possible is my advice. Try to start fresh if you can. But if you cannot, try to figure out what needs to be brought over. An example is shown here, which is the app assessment that we usually perform for our customers. The customer will then make a decision on each app in the final column. An important point here, though, is that for every app that you wish to abandon in cloud, make sure that all users involved are familiar with that decision and can raise objections in a timely manner. So one way of doing that is you identify all the users that are using this particular add-on, whether in their pages or in their workflows, in their projects. Make sure that they are aware that this is happening, that this is going to be abandoned, and then give them enough time to raise objections. We will discuss in the next slide how we can do this and avoid surprises for your users. Other assessments not shown here include user assessment, which is which user has invalid or duplicate emails and the decision for those, as well as integrity checks using both the Jira built-in as well as the configuration manager for Jira's integrity checker tool, which is my favorite tool because it actually checks more items than the Jira built-in integrity checker. All right, so next slide. Communicate, communicate, communicate. That's what I mentioned earlier, right? Make sure everyone is aware what is happening. And over here, you can see this in an example of apps and macros that are going away. This is something that you can send to your users, the SMEs, the power users that are heavily using a particular app, so that they are aware that these are going away. Make sure everyone is aware of what is happening. I've seen too often migrations that were very smooth, like, start to end, everything is well planned, but it only failed due to the lack of communication with users that actually use the system. We had one scenario before, I cannot mention the customer, but it was quite funny that they did not tell their users that they are actually migrating to cloud. And once that is completed, the users were surprised that they no longer can access their server instance. And then essentially there was no communication prior to that. So nobody knew what was going on. So we had to roll back the migration simply because nobody was aware that the migration even happened. So their IT support were inundated with requests a day after the migration, and the number of upset stakeholders was enough to warrant the rollback. At the very minimum, all users need to be informed on when the migration would take place, what functionalities would change, where the staging of production instance would be if they want to do tests or UAT, and how to highlight issues to the team. Give the user sufficient time, as I mentioned before. There's no point having all this great communication plan, but you only give them 6 hours to respond, right? And then give them sufficient time to perform UAT and to document their objections or lack thereof. You can mention in the plan that if we don't receive any objection by this date, we will proceed. And this will be useful for your go or no-go decision. All right, next, the Runbook. This is an example of a Runbook that you can get when you raise the move ticket with Atlassian. They will actually create a move space for your particular migration. And the Runbook here is very important. And I would say document all the key decisions and steps even before the first test migration. An example is shown here, which is the usual template. And the key elements here are the task description, the timeline, the product involved. I probably won't have time to go through every single one of these. You can just raise the move ticket and get one of them from Atlassian, and you will see what's the important criteria here. Be as detailed as possible and include steps to verify post-migration result. Identify responsibilities and make sure tasks are in the correct order, like I mentioned just now about the Confluence and Jira migration that is happening together. So make sure they are in the correct order to avoid race condition issues. Don't underestimate the importance of timing each task accurately as well to avoid the migration going over the weekend migration window. And what we do in ServiceRocket is also during the go, no-go meeting before the production migration, we will actually specify the exact time in multiple time zones if this involves multiple people from different geographic locations working on the migration. We will specify the exact time that each of these tasks will occur so that people would be aware that they don't have to stay the entire weekend in front of their PC waiting for their tasks. There should be at least 2 individuals that are familiar with the Runbook and can perform the migration independently on D-Day. This usually isn't a problem if your Runbook is so detailed that even a high school student can perform the migration. All right, and yeah, and since each step of the migration require help from separate individuals such as the DBA or web server admin, all members of the migration team needs to acknowledge every step that they are responsible for within the Runbook. You need to make sure that they are involved at least 2 weeks before production migration weekend. Otherwise, you would see a lot of surprises, people that are not online when they were supposed to. So make sure they are on board, and you need to get everybody to be essentially empowered. You need to tell them the why. get them to be excited about the migration. Otherwise, if you have users that are not excited about it, they're not going to do a good job. All right, next slide, please. And we're not done yet. Just because the migration is complete doesn't mean you're done. Take the migration as an opportunity not just to migrate your instance to cloud, but also to transform how you work. So with the cloud migration, since you're in a new environment, you should have a change in mindset also of how you manage Jira. The aim here is cloud transformation and not just cloud migration. So an example is you can think about how Atlassian Access can enable your users to have a seamless login experience. Maybe in server, you would have your users log in using different credentials for Jira, different credentials for Confluence, and different credentials for the other apps. With cloud, since you have Atlassian Access, it's very easy to enable SSO. So go ahead and take advantage of that. How about training? Right now, it's a new system. It's good to now have a refresher for the user to learn best practices for the first time in a clean cloud environment. So the mistakes of the past when it comes to how you manage your server instance, like for example, how you allow everyone to create custom fields. Whenever they need something, they are then automatically elevated as Jira admins to create screens, workflows, whatever they want. Let it not be repeated in cloud because that's not how we should scale. A strong change management process, which is something that ServiceRocket does as a scope work with some of our customers. We actually help them implement very strong change management process to govern Jira Confluence changes. We can help you with that as well. If you have a strong change management process, you're going to have you're not going to have a free-for-all instance that you had in the past, where everyone can be admins, projects custom fields are created in reckless abandon. You're going to have better control and it's going to scale a bit more. You don't even have to think about this only when you're moving to cloud. You can even think a bit about it right now. What can you do to your current instance so that it can scale? It will be a good idea to follow the example of one of our customers that employ a very good change management process. All workflow transitions, screen or custom field requested by their users need to first be raised as an ITSM issue with their Jira admins with clear business reasoning. The users manager would then approve the request and the suggested change would then be tested in staging before UAT. Once that is complete, the Jira admins as a change advisory board reviews the results of the change for any performance impact and also reviews the production runbook. Once the CAP approves the change, an administrator then performs the change according to the runbook before the change management issue is resolved. Now, this process can seem too cumbersome and can be too lengthy, but it ensures a clean Jira instance that scales with time. And you're not going to have custom fields that have no purpose or custom fields that are duplicated or redundant. And that's it. Yeah, right. And that's it for today's presentation. Now I can answer some of the questions you may have. As always, ServiceRocket has your back. Reach out to us for any information for any questions you may have. Back to you, Mario.
Hey, thanks, Foogie. That was awesome. We have a bunch of nice questions here. Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's get started. So the first one is when it comes to the factors that can fail migration. So is there a way to fix the duplicate users before the migration? Is there a script?
Yep. In terms of script, there's actually a few scripts you can consider. Potentially, you can look at REST API to do it, or using CLI. We can help you write it. And I think that question came from Baris. Baris probably would have the knowledge to do it himself as well. So Baris, REST API, CLI, or even SQL. A lot of the consultants prefer to use SQL because it's direct, it's quick, but REST API is just a lot safer.
Right. Awesome. We have one here from Georgette. I believe it's about JCMA. And the question is, when does it work and when does it work?
When does it work? In what context is this? JCMA.
Let's see.
JCMA works if you do not have Jira Service Management projects that you need to migrate. I think that's probably the right context. But yeah, if you have Jira Service Management projects right now, you cannot use JCMA, so you have to migrate using a full Jira site, export and import. Now, that is a concern, right? Imagine if you're trying to merge two Jira Cloud instances, and both of them have Jira Service Management. How do you merge those instances, right? Because you cannot just you cannot just migrate one of the cloud instance into server and then migrate the projects one by one into the target instance. You would have to migrate both Jira Cloud instance into a server, into each individual server instances, migrate the projects one by one into the other server instance, and then migrate that server instance into cloud, which is why I always tell customers, when it comes to merge projects, you're going to be spending a lot of money because that is a lot of work.
Yeah, Georgette saying sounds so complex. It does indeed. And that's why we are here to help.
Yeah.
If any further assistance is needed, we're going to be there. We're going to be there for you, Georgette. Let's see what else. We have one here from Luke. What does move stand for? Where do we notify Atlassian? Thanks.
Oh, yeah. In support.atlassian.com, when you raise a ticket, you can say, I want migration support. If you click that, it automatically creates a move ticket. So I would say inform them as early as possible, even if you're just having that thought, maybe I should migrate to cloud, because that move ticket is going to tell you whether you're making the right decision or not. They will actually force you to actually run some assessments, and in order to move the ticket to the next progress. It is not like a standard support issue where they would then reply to you, you have to reply to them, and then if you don't reply, it will time out. It's not like that. It's actually like a proper consulting project from Atlassian side, where they will manage the whole migration end to end. But usually they would advise you to also get the help of a partner, because their experience is also limited in terms of the difficulties that you may face.
All right. So to raise the ticket, all you need to do is to go to their support service desk, and there's going to be an option there. Awesome.
Yeah, the option is called migration support.
Awesome. Thanks, Foogie. All right, let's see another one here. Can we modify the cloud instance view page to look more like the server version? About the look and feel of the instance.
Oh, you can't. Unfortunately, with cloud, so the new UI was part of an initiative. I knew the lady that was leading that initiative as well, and at that time I was still part of Atlassian. It was a very difficult period of time because they wanted to have, that was the start of Atlassian essentially saying that all cloud instances should behave exactly the same. There should not be because during the on-demand era, different on-demand instances would have different, functionalities. You can say I want this type of behavior in my on-demand instance. But then ever since they moved into the AWS microservice model, they realized that all instances need to behave exactly the same way. Otherwise, it will, the microservice model will just fail, because microservice is essentially, for example, the page operation would be run by a single microservice. I shouldn't go too detailed here because it can bore the rest of you. So, but essentially the microservice module is the reason why they had to standardize everything. And at the same time, they have users that do complain that their UI looks a bit dated. And in order to cater to that requirement, they then change the UI for all cloud instances, and they make it compulsory. You cannot change it back. At one time, you can still change it back to the old look. Unfortunately, right now, there's no way, because they actually give you a grace period to raise objection that grace period has already been over and there's no way they can turn back on that anymore.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I saw a question that is really good, which is why are we being forced to move to cloud? I think it's an Atlassian direction. I would tell you though that it seems Atlassian is moving towards a cloud first kind of model. So eventually you see, functionality wise, cloud will become more and more capable, whereas DC would remain pretty much stagnant. Just a prediction.
Yeah, I would say, if you allow me, Foogie, they are asking folks to move to cloud mainly because the server edition is being retired, and there is a deadline for this, right, Foogie? I believe it's April 2024. Is that right? So that is why right now there's so much debates about moving to cloud and so on. All right, so I guess we have a couple more, Foogie. So so we have many add-ons, and we are concerned how stable, mature is Jira Cloud with add-ons. So some of the add-ons that Vivian appears to have is requirements management for Jira, Tempo, Big Picture. So I'll let you answer this one, Foogie.
Yeah, so with add-on vendors right now, they are seeing a huge growth in the cloud in the cloud ecosystem. So a lot of these vendors are doing a lot of big change. Just like a few months ago, probably like 6 months ago, a lot of these apps probably have a lot of limitations in cloud. For example, I can tell you one clear example is Insight. Insight, prior to the acquisition by Atlassian, the cloud app, I would say, doesn't work at all in terms of integrating it with Jira Service Management. There's no functionality to integrate it. But just 2 months ago, they've made huge changes to it. And the same goes for, and now Insight in cloud is essentially almost exactly like a carbon copy of their server app. The same thing goes for even ServiceRocket apps. We are putting a lot of investment into making all our apps 100% cloud ready, to the point that you shouldn't be able to see too many functionality that is broken. So I think most of the functionality would have been mirrored in cloud, especially for JMWE. I saw JMWE being mentioned there. I think some of it may, when it comes to the migration, you may have to, you definitely need to make some modifications to your post functions and your conditions, but it's very simple mod, and pretty much a lot of the functionality should remain the same.
Yeah, in reality, I believe that each vendor follows their own parity path. So it's hard to say, but yeah, thanks, Foogie. So another question here from Georgette. What tools do you use for your post migrations to be 100% certain that the migration was successful?
This is a tough question to answer, but a very good one. What tools do we use? We do have a few strategy. One is we work with Atlassian. We give them, so we run a few analyses before we migrate in server. We run a few statistics-based queries in the database, and then post-migration we ask Atlassian to run it for us in cloud. They can do that, and then we compare the data. That's one way of doing the comparison, because the CCMA and JCMA summary usually gives you all the niceties, I call it, like very nice details, makes you feel like the migration is completely successful when there are some hidden issues. So that's one way we make sure that the migration is successful. The other way is we have some scripts to actually crawl through pages, and then identifying pages that have, for example, diff equals to error. That's for Confluence, and then that helps us identify whether there are any pages that are broken. But ultimately, you still need a very powerful, a very detailed UAT guideline. And we do give that to our customer as well. We come up with a UAT guideline and a 2-week UAT window that they can then test their own pages, their own instances, and then after that raise issues that they find. Because I don't think there is a tool right now that 100% can go and crawl through every page, every single issue, and tell us essentially this migration is 100% accurate. I don't think there is that right now.
Thanks, Foogie. And the last one here, I guess you can see it too, Foogie. Will Office 365 integration add-on going to be available in Jira Cloud?
I'm sorry, I don't have answer to that. That's a good question. I have to defer. Mario, do you know the answer to that?
I do not know. I believe that there should be something in the Atlassian community. You know, probably somebody already asked this question there. So I would go there to, you know, to see if you can find any information. But yeah, that's a tough one. I also don't know. Yeah, thanks, Foogie. Not sure if anyone else has, you know, any other questions. I guess we still have a few minutes. Oh, yeah. You're most welcome. Thanks for joining us today. You know, if any questions come up, please don't hesitate to shoot us an email. We're gonna be more than happy to be of assistance, and we can even have a separate call to answer specific questions. So please, yeah, as we have it here in the slide, we got your back. So it's gonna be a pleasure to help.